Have you ever felt like you're living someone else's life? Like you're following a script written by invisible hands? You wake up, play your roles, make your choices, but something feels off, doesn't it? What if you're trapped in a prison so subtle, so perfectly disguised, that you mistake it for freedom? You're living in a prison without bars, and Carl Jung spent his life showing us how it works, and how to break free. By the end of this video, you'll understand what Jung called one of humanity's greatest tragedies, that most people spend their entire lives imprisoned without ever realizing they're in a cell. You'll discover the 4 invisible walls that contain you, how to recognize when you're hitting them, and Jung's path to freedom. But here's the disturbing part. Once you see these walls, you can never unsee them, and that changes everything. Jung spent decades studying the human psyche, and what he found was both liberating and terrifying. He discovered that we're not nearly as free as we think we are. Most of us are like puppets dancing to music we cannot hear, following choreography written by forces we've never acknowledged. Until you make the unconscious conscious, Jung warned, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. That's the prison. Not bars and guards, but the unconscious mind quietly pulling your strings while you believe you're making free choices. The most dangerous prison is the one you don't know you're in. The architecture of your cell. Jung identified something that most people spend their whole lives ignoring. The unconscious doesn't just influence your life, it runs it. You may think you're the CEO of your own existence, making rational decisions based on values and goals. But in truth, the unconscious is the board of directors making the real choices behind the scenes. Think about your last major decision. Did you carefully weigh the options, or did you feel mysteriously pulled in one direction? That mysterious pull isn't mysterious at all. It's the unconscious, a vast storehouse of forgotten memories, suppressed emotions, and inherited patterns that quietly shape everything you do, think, and feel. And it's not just the big decisions. The unconscious shapes the small ones too. Who you're attracted to, the conflicts you keep stumbling into, the self-sabotage that strikes just as success comes close. None of it is random. Your vision becomes clear when you can look into your own heart, Jung observed. Who looks outside, dreams. Who looks inside, awakes. Most people never look inside. They live reacting to external circumstances, believing they're steering the ship, when in reality they're being carried along by unconscious programming as predictable as computer code. The prison has 4 walls, each one designed to feel normal, even natural. Let's walk through them, because once you see these walls, you'll recognize how they've shaped your entire existence. Wall 1, the persona, your beautiful mask. The first wall is the most seductive because it makes you feel special. Jung called it the persona, the mask you wear to navigate social life. We all have multiple personas. There's the professional at work, the family role at home, the curated version online. These masks aren't necessarily false. They are real aspects of who you are. But here's the trap. You begin to believe the mask is your true face. How much of your identity is tied to your job title, your social role, or the image others have of you? When someone asks, "Who are you?" do you describe your authentic self, or do you list your functions and achievements? The persona becomes a prison when you forget it's a role and begin mistaking it for your whole identity. Decisions stop being about your deepest values and instead revolve around maintaining the image you've created. Jung saw this everywhere. The successful executive who's miserable but can't quit because his identity depends on being successful. The perfect parent who's lost themselves entirely in caring for others. The rebel who is trapped by the need to always oppose, even when it's destructive. The persona is a complicated system of relations between individual consciousness and society, Jung explained. But if you identify with it too strongly, you lose access to your authentic self. You know this wall is trapping you when you make choices mostly to satisfy others' expectations, when you feel drained from constant performance, and when you sense you're living someone else's life but can't imagine an alternative. The persona promises belonging and approval, but it often delivers exhaustion and isolation. Because deep down, you know people are responding to your mask, not to you. And the persona is just the first wall. The second is even darker, because it hides the parts of yourself you've tried hardest to deny. Wall 2. The shadow, the banished self. If the persona is who you pretend to be, the shadow is who you refuse to be. Jung discovered that everyone has a shadow, a storehouse of traits, impulses, and aspects of personality you've rejected or suppressed. These qualities aren't always evil. They're simply the parts that didn't fit your self-image or that society labeled unacceptable. Maybe you learned early that anger wasn't allowed, so you buried your ability to stand up for yourself. Maybe vulnerability felt too dangerous, so you locked away your need for connection. Maybe creativity seemed impractical, so you abandoned it for security. But nothing in the psyche truly disappears. When you banish parts of yourself to the shadow, they don't die. They go underground and begin operating outside your control. One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, Jung wrote, but by making the darkness conscious. The shadow wall operates through projection. You see in others what you've refused to acknowledge in yourself. The qualities that trigger your strongest reactions are often mirrors reflecting your own hidden aspects. Think about someone who irritates you deeply. Is it their arrogance, their dishonesty, their weakness? Ask yourself, could it be that some piece of that quality exists in you, but you've been unwilling to admit it? This is why shadow work is so uncomfortable. Your ego has spent years keeping certain truths out of sight. Admitting the shadow feels like admitting you're not who you thought you were. But ignoring your shadow doesn't make you good. It makes you unconscious, and unconscious people are dangerous because they act out their shadows through blame, projection, and sudden eruptions of the very qualities they claim to despise. The shadow wall keeps you imprisoned by ensuring you never become whole. You remain split, battling yourself, wasting energy, and misperceiving reality. And even if you start to integrate your persona and shadow, you'll still have to face the third wall, perhaps the most pervasive of all. Wall 3, the collective, the herd's leash. Jung lived through 2 world wars and saw something horrifying. Entire populations lost their individuality to collective madness. Ordinary people carried out atrocities, not because they were inherently evil, but because they surrendered their own judgment to the group. The mass crushes out the insight and reflection that are still possible with the individual, Jung observed. This third wall is collective conformity, the way society, culture, and group identity gradually erode your ability to think for yourself. It doesn't just happen in times of war, it happens daily, in subtle ways. You adopt opinions because everyone around you holds them. You chase goals because society tells you they matter. You hide aspects of yourself that don't fit the cultural script. The collective wall works through a simple trade. It promises belonging in exchange for conformity. Stand out too much, question too deeply, and you risk rejection. Most people take the deal unconsciously. They align their beliefs and behaviors with their peer group, their profession, their tribe. It feels natural. Humans crave connection. But Jung saw the danger. When you surrender individual consciousness to the collective, you become capable of actions your true self would never allow. You can justify cruelty for the sake of the group. You can ignore truth to protect cohesion. You can abandon integrity for belonging. Today, this wall is amplified by technology. Algorithms feed you only what confirms your group's beliefs. Echo chambers feel like reality, but are carefully designed prisons for your mind. You'll know this wall has you when you struggle to hold an opinion that differs from your circle, when you feel anxious even considering an idea that challenges your group, and when you define yourself more by what you oppose than by what you truly value. The collective wall promises safety, but it delivers unconsciousness. You gain acceptance, but you lose yourself. And even this wall is not as deeply personal as the fourth. The wall that convinces you your suffering is fate. Wall 4, complexes, the patterns that repeat. The fourth wall is psychological complexes, perhaps the most destructive prison of all. Jung discovered that painful or emotionally charged experiences create complexes, like emotional scars that keep replaying themselves. These complexes are not under full conscious control. They operate like little sub-personalities with their own logic and their own agenda. Think of a complex as a wound that never healed. Instead of integrating the experience, part of your psyche froze around it, creating a loop that plays out again and again. Maybe you grew up with a critical parent, and now you find yourself drawn to critical partners, or becoming overly critical yourself, or unable to handle criticism at all. That's a father complex. Maybe you experienced early loss or neglect, and now you cling to relationships desperately, or sabotage them before someone else can leave you. That's an abandonment complex. Complexes are autonomous groups of associations that have a tendency to move by themselves, Jung explained. The complex wall is insidious because it feels like fate. You keep attracting the same problems and think it's bad luck. But it's not luck. It's your unconscious recreating familiar situations in the hope of rewriting the story. That's why people often marry someone like their parent. Why victims sometimes become perpetrators. Why those raised in chaos find ways to create chaos as adults. It's not choice, it's complex activation. You'll know this wall is active when you spot recurring patterns that feel outside your control, when you see your family history repeating despite your best efforts, or when the same wounds are triggered by different faces. Complexes keep you looping endlessly, mistaking compulsion for destiny. How the walls work together. Jung's prison is so effective because the walls reinforce one another. The persona hides the shadow. The unowned shadow gets projected onto outgroups, strengthening collective thinking. The collective provides ready-made personas that feel authentic, but are actually borrowed. And complexes keep you acting out the same stories, which you mistake for fate. Each wall conceals the others, each justifies the others. Together they create a system that feels like freedom, but is really unconscious compulsion. People will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own souls, Jung observed. And that's why most people stay inside the prison. Illusions feel safer than truth. But Jung also offered a way out. Jung's path to freedom. Jung didn't just describe the prison, he handed us a key. He called it individuation, the process of becoming whole by bringing unconscious material into consciousness and integrating it. Individuation isn't about becoming perfect, it's about becoming real. It's about acknowledging both light and shadow, both persona and authenticity, both the individual and the collective. The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are, Jung said. It begins with recognizing that you are not your thoughts, emotions, personas, or complexes. You are the awareness that can observe them. When you can see your personas without mistaking them for identity, they become tools instead of prisons. When you can face your shadow without shame, it becomes a source of vitality instead of projection. When you can participate in society without losing yourself in it, you can contribute meaningfully instead of being consumed. And when you can recognize your complexes, you can begin healing wounds instead of replaying them. Individuation is not a final destination. It is a lifelong path. Jung himself never claimed to be finished with it. Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves, he noted. This is why liberation often hides in plain sight. In every trigger, every repetition, every mask, every judgment. The walls are the barriers. Freedom is what lies beyond them. The modern prison. If Jung's insights were urgent in his time, they are essential today. The modern world has amplified every wall. Social media has turned the persona into a 24/7 performance. The shadow is projected in endless waves of outrage and moral grandstanding. Collective conformity is enforced by algorithmic echo chambers, and complexes are triggered constantly by the addictive design of our digital lives. The prison has adapted to the modern world, and most people don't even realize they are inmates. But this also creates opportunity. The walls are easier to see than ever. The patterns are more obvious. The question is whether you will use this visibility to wake up, or allow yourself to fall deeper into sleep. The choice you face. Jung's message is uncomfortable, but it's also liberating. You are less free than you think, but you are more free than you've dared to believe. Less free, because unconscious forces have been shaping your life without your awareness. More free, because the moment you become conscious of them, you gain the power to choose. The invisible prison exists, but it's not inescapable. The walls are real, but they are built from unconscious material that dissolves when exposed to awareness. Who looks outside, dreams. Who looks inside, awakes. So ask yourself, will you keep dreaming inside the prison or risk the discomfort of awakening? Will you keep believing you're free while acting out old patterns, or will you do the harder work of actually becoming free? Jung spent his life pointing people to the walls of their invisible prisons, not to discourage them, but to set them free. The first step is realizing you are contained. The second step is walking out of a cell that was never locked. The door has always been open, you just couldn't see it from inside. If this resonates with you and you're ready to examine your own invisible prison, subscribe to this channel. We're here for those who refuse to sleepwalk through life. And tell us in the comments, what's one pattern you once thought was fate, but now see could be unconscious programming? The invisible prison is real, but so is your capacity to walk free.